Hello to everyone on the internet. I am Nathan of Washington, and you are watching Culture Shock, the only show on the internet that knows how to separate an issue of culture from an issue of politics. It is currently Monday, December 10th, and this is the news. Alright, so from Texas to North Carolina, there are 300,000 people without power to their homes, and 1,500 flights which have been canceled. This is due to record snowfall, flooding, and freezing, which has resulted in a declaration of emergency, which cannot currently be dealt with. North Carolina and southern Virginia have also received heavy snowfall for the better part of a week. In fact, the mountains in North Carolina could see as much as 12 inches of snow in the fucking mountains. So that's pretty high up. I mean, what's with all the crazy weather we've been seeing lately? With all the earthquakes and like the 7.6 earthquakes in Alaska and in the French-owned islands. A couple of the islands owned by France have seen similar, also followed up by tsunami warnings. There's been a lot of crazy weather lately, and it kind of got me wondering, I still don't believe in anthropogenic global warming. You'd have to try real hard to convince me that was a thing. But I do believe that it is part of a natural process. And I can't help but feel like maybe these crazy weather patterns of late have been kind of part and parcel of that process. Of what I currently believe to be the coming of a new ice age. It's like we weren't around for the last one, so we don't know how it started. It could have started very similar to this. Let's not pretend that our modern society is going to last forever, alright? Because nothing really does. Everything goes through a cycle. The Norse believed that the Ragnarok was the end of a cycle. 'Twas not Armageddon, 'twas merely the end of a cycle. And it came in many forms. Winter was the Ragnarok of the year. Trees losing their leaves and turning into, they're just big skeletons of a tree. That was a form of Ragnarok. Old age was a form of Ragnarok. So the Ice Age kind of fits into that framework, which makes sense, especially since there's been several Ice Ages. That's just currently my theory, that they were hitting up on what is essentially a natural process, creating a spiritual belief out of a simple observation of nature at work. As many pagan and even Hindu spiritual beliefs start out as. They're based on observations of natural processes. Processes. Yes, contrary to popular belief, the actual term is processes. Yeah, blows your mind, don't it? English is funny like that. Anyway. I certainly hope that this doesn't become like a huge disaster where like a shit ton of people end up dying. I mean, some people act like 300,000 people without power to their homes would be end of the world. But we survived thousands of years without electricity. We did it before, we could probably do it again. It'd just be a little harder. They canceled the flights in time, thankfully, so no disasters there. So I'll try my best to keep you updated on that situation. So, more than 400 people have been detained in Brussels during a Yellow Vest-style riot. Yellow Vest has now evolved into a pan-global movement. It is no longer purely French. In fact, this is a classic case of monkey see, monkey do. as Belgian rioters have taken up the Yellow Vest moniker, obviously inspired by France since they share a border with them. Naturally, their police have been using such maneuvers as tear gas, and they were protecting the EU headquarters, as well as the Belgian governmental offices. Peace was restored about 5 hours later. They were able to end the chaos. But you know what? The EU is just shitty. It's an absolutely shitty organization. And quite frankly, the European people should simply learn to revolt against them. It's a slow, laboring beast. Mind you, this is from my American perspective, and this is simply my opinion. But as if history has taught us anything, it's that giant multi-governmental mechas, like the EU, have a tendency to just turn absolutely rotten after a time. You know why the Allied Nations was the best mecha ever? Because it ended. Because it didn't have the chance to turn into what the United Nations turned into. Which is basically a farce. The EU is a very similar kind of organization. It too is a mecha, with many rules and regulations and so forth. I would say it probably started out as a very wonderful idea, as these kind of things usually do. But in the end of the day, it finds a way of just turning completely awful. Because you got the European currency, the euro, which by the by loses value, has lost a lot of value since it was created, faster than any other kind of money out there. Plus, we got EU censoring memes and babying and pampering their citizens. Basically treating you all like you're a bunch of snowflakes. And naturally, you kind of got to turn up your nose at least a little bit to an organization like that. Bottom line is, the best ideas of how to get something done are usually the simplest. If you make it too complicated, then it's probably that much more likely to fail. Trust me, I know. I'm a chronic overthinker. I have a hard time thinking simply, and it often gets in the way of me accomplishing my goals from day to day. The EU functions in a similar capacity, in my opinion. Still, a lot of people are upset with the way Europe is run today. And as I and one of my favorite people on the internet, Varg Vikernes, were both hoping for, though I've never spoken to Varg. It'd be awesome if I could. We have both hoped that the Yellow Vest movement would become an influence and others would follow the idea. Modern-day politics and governments are largely tyrannical, with the American government, at least for its own citizens, being the least tyrannical, and the most tyrannical being governments like China and North Korea. Modern-day politics are largely oppressive. And so I think a little revolution every now and again is a healthy thing, just so long as it doesn't get too bloody. Make it fast, make it quick. Like ripping off a Band-Aid. Anyway. Emmanuel Macron is to break his silence soon about the French Yellow Vests. Advocates of Mr. Macron are confident that he can reach the people's hearts and pocketbooks. Although, to me, that seems a bit doubtful, since his history as a leader clearly shows that he favors the rich and simply does not understand the common French worker. Gee, that sounds kind of familiar. It kind of sounds like the American Democratic Party. and how they tend to operate. Democrats are very similar in that capacity. They favor the rich and don't understand the common working man. The right is wrong and the left doesn't get it. So vote libertarian. See what I did there? It's true, though. Macron very much reminds me of a Democrat, of an American Democrat. They would have a great deal in common. You could say he is sort of like a look into what would have happened if here in America we allowed Hillary to win the presidency. Because I think she probably would have made some decisions that were very similar to Emmanuel Macron. And then we would have had American yellow vests. Which, by the way, I still think should be a thing. Should the government ever become more tyrannical than it already is. There's still some hope. I mean, with Trump is not a particularly oppressive leader. Anyway, I'm getting off track here. So moving on. Former Nissan chairman Carlos Ghosn has been charged with underreporting his pay, how much money he makes. Well, whoop-de-frickin-do, who cares? That's none of the government's business. That's his money, he makes it fair and square. I'll say it before, I'll say it again. We have a right to privacy, and taxation is theft. So he underreports his pay. That basically falls under the same classification of laws as tax evasion. Oh yeah, you know, let us take your money and force you to tell us how much you make, or we give you the jail. We give you the hose. Yeah, you know, that's not a violation of our rights or nothing. Nope. No, sir. Six Israelis dead after a Palestinian attack. Yeah, this was a drive-by shooting at a bus stop. This nonsense over in the Middle East and the Gaza Strip is absolutely nuts. It's like, it's true, okay? The Jews were miserable and they needed a country of their own, a place to be where they wouldn't be abused or made to feel unwelcome. But at the same time, we should have realized that restoring them to their original homeland, their original soil where they came from, which had since been occupied and become just as valuable to Palestinians, we were basically opening up an absolutely insane can of worms. And I think it should have become very obvious what was going to happen. But what would you do, you know? It was one of those things of like, damned if you do, damned if you don't. I hate to say this, but you know what? I think it's time that we just wash our hands of it. We just straight up wash our hands of it. It's Israel's problem now. We done our part. We gave them their country. Now it's up to them to take care of it. Unless they need foreign aid. We'll send food, money for food and other shit, but forget spending another penny on military support. I'm with Rand Paul on this one. Nick Ayers refuses to replace John Kelly as White House Chief of Staff, leaving the position open and generating some discomfort in the White House. This will obviously be disruptive to the normal day-to-day operations of the office. Trump's been having a hard time replacing John Kelly. The decision to replace John Kelly, period, has been controversial. But, I mean, he's the president. All he needs is a little, all he needs is one solid reason, and he can do it, and he can do it if he wants to. I just hope that they solve this issue soon. Because a disrupted White House is an unhappy White House. And that could lead to complications in the president being able to do his job effectively. And then finally, the aforementioned Rand Paul has been disturbed by Jeff Sessions' successor, William Barr, who has a liberal view of civil forfeiture, which, if you're not familiar, is basically the police's ability to remove money from anyone they feel is remove any money a person has on them if they are suspected of any criminal behavior. And don't get me wrong, people's futures have been absolutely ruined by civil forfeiture. There was this guy traveling with $2,500 money in a bag, and the police removed it from him. He was going off to live his dream as an actor. That money was raised by his family, and it was a fucking lot. And then the cops just, no suspicion whatsoever, just take it from him. Now, I'm not sure what the liberal view of civil forfeiture is exactly. Because the Liberal Party, the liberal ideology is so mixed these days between center-left and snowflakes. It's hard to say what's truly reflective of what a good liberal should actually believe anymore. So it's a little hard to say. But what should truly be disturbing is the fact that William Barr supports the Patriot Act. Oh yeah, you remember that, right? What a lovely thing, the Patriot Act. A violation of our right to privacy in the name of security. The Patriot Act was unconstitutional and illegal. You know, classic sign of government abuse. Absolutely tyrannical. The Second Amendment folks should have gone after the government right then and there. But they didn't. Sure, they talk a good game about going after a tyrannical government, but when it comes to actually doing it, somehow they fail to deliver. So yeah, this has got me worried too, Mr. William Barr. An unclear view on civil forfeiture and the support of the fucking Patriot Act. You should be worried. Especially since they're going to be making him Attorney General. That'll give him the authority to essentially... You think he's going to honestly pay attention to due process? Fuck no. He's going to skirt due process and just do things his way. That's what guys like him are like. So you should be disturbed by William Barr. Because he's probably going to end up violating your rights. And in the final story for Culture Shock today, Jared Kushner apparently is best buds with Saudi Prince Mohammed bin Salman. And no, I did not make a mistake there. I said that ironically. I deliberately said Mohammed bin Salman. Because you know what? He gets away with so much just because we depend on Saudi's oil. Gets away with killing folks like Khashoggi and other human rights violations under his reign. So as far as I'm concerned, he is Mohammed bin Salman. Muhammad bin Salman. There you go. Muhammad bin Salman. He's a fishy cow. But they've been sharing political advice. And he could possibly, and Mr. Muhammad bin Salman could have been politically influencing Mr. Kushner. And this is not the first time Jared Kushner has found himself in the news for some possible controversy or another. The guy attracts that kind of attention. like a fucking magnet. And quite frankly, Mohammed bin Salman is about as it's about as controversial as they come. By the by, if you are offended by my sense of humor and my mocking of Mohammed bin Salman, then you are probably a snowflake, and this show is not for you. I am absolutely unapologetic. I believe I will do a Saturday edition. I should find a regular schedule for the Culture Shock Aftershock, where I will give you a little talk about why we need to not worry so much about offending one another, and instead work on developing a thicker skin. Anyway, that's it for the Culture Shock today, folks. Cheers.